Welcome to this deep dive. Before we step into today's journey, take a quick second to do us a favor. Please like this video, comment below with your own ideas as we go, and make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel Bibliophile.
Yeah, please do. It really helps us bring you more of these thorough analyses.
Exactly. So to start us off, I want you to imagine you are sitting in the passenger cabin of a massive commercial jet, cruising at 30,000 feet.
Right, and you naturally assume there is a highly trained pilot in the cockpit, like meticulously checking every dial, reading every gauge, and making these purely rational decisions to keep you safe.
We deeply crave that comforting thought, right? We
Yeah.
desperately want to believe that the entity flying the plane, or, the consciousness running our day-to-day lives is entirely deliberate and fully awake.
Oh, absolutely. Perfectly calculating. But if you pull back the curtain, turns out that highly logical pilot is actually fast asleep at the controls.
Yeah, and the entire flight is being run by this hyperactive, corner-cutting autopilot that reacts to every passing shadow, and it simply refuses to be turned off.
Which is pretty terrifying when you think about it. But that's the reality. Today, our mission is to crack open Daniel Kahneman's monumental work, Thinking Fast and Slow.
And we aren't doing this just to, recount the basic summaries you might have heard before. We really want to map the exact hidden machinery that causes our cognitive blind spots.
Right. The goal is to give you a richer, more precise vocabulary to understand your own mind and to spot the fascinating and sometimes hilarious decision-making errors people make every single day at the proverbial office water cooler.
To understand those errors, we have to look at the architecture of the mind. Kahneman introduces two fictitious characters to describe how we process the world, System 1 and System 2.
And the dynamic between them kind of dictates everything we think we know. So let's unpack the autopilot first. That's System 1.
Right. And System 1 operates automatically, involuntarily, and
incredibly quickly, yeah. It takes virtually no effort. I mean, if you look at a photo of an angry woman, you don't consciously analyze her furrowed brow.
No, of course not. You instantly know she's angry and you anticipate she's about to shout. Or if I say 2 plus 2, the number 4 just detonates in your head.
Exactly. You don't calculate it, you just experience the answer. That happens because System 1 is fundamentally an associative machine. It operates by constantly matching patterns.
It doesn't use logic, it just uses recognition based on a massive database of past experiences.
Right. Now, contrast that with System 2. If System 1 is the autopilot, System 2 is the sleepy captain. It's responsible for allocating attention to effortful mental activities.
So if I ask you to multiply 17 by 24, System 1 just draws a complete blank. It has no pattern for that.
None at all. You have to actively retrieve the rules of multiplication, hold intermediate numbers in your working memory, and, consciously grind your way to 408.
It is slow, deliberate, and fiercely protective of its energy. And what's really fascinating is that this isn't just a metaphor for psychology. It is intensely physical.
Oh, yeah. Kahneman's early research on pupillometry proves this perfectly. They monitored subjects performing mental sprints, like holding a string of numbers in their head and adding 3 to each digit.
The add 3 task. As the mental math got harder, the subject's pupils visibly dilated and their heart rates spiked. Your eyes literally act as a window to your cognitive load.
It's wild. The moment the subject solved the problem or the moment they hit their absolute limit and gave up, the pupils immediately constricted again.
Because the brain is a biological organ and System 2 operations consume a massive amount of glucose, attention is quite literally a finite physical budget.
And because it requires so much biological energy, intense focus actually creates a physiological blindness to everything else, which is the mechanism behind the famous invisible gorilla experiment.
I love the mechanics of this study. So, participants are asked to watch a video of people passing basketballs, and they have to count the passes made by the team in white.
Right, which requires intense System 2 focus to track the movement.
Exactly. And halfway through the video, a woman in a full gorilla suit walks right across the court, thumps her chest, and walks off. She is on screen for 9 seconds.
9 whole seconds, and half the people never even register she was there.
Wait, really? Half of them?
Yeah. I mean, their visual cortex technically receives the photons of light bouncing off the gorilla suit, but System 2 has allocated 100% of the brain's processing budget to the basketball.
So the information is completely discarded before it ever reaches conscious awareness. We are blind to the obvious, and we're blind to our blindness.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. If System 2 is so logical and smart, why doesn't it just stay awake and double-check everything System 1 does?
Well,
I picture System 1 as this overeager, hyperactive junior intern who constantly shoves draft reports onto the desk of System 2, who acts like an exhausted CEO. Why does the CEO let the intern make any decisions at all without double-checking the math?
The CDO simply doesn't have the biological bandwidth. Psychologists call this the law of least effort. Constant vigilance is evolutionarily impractical.
Because we'd just burn out.
Exactly. Imagine walking down a busy city street. If your System 2 tried to consciously process every single face, decode every engine noise, and read every neon sign, you would instantly collapse from sensory overload.
So to protect its limited capacity, System 2 defaults to a low-effort mode. It routinely rubber stamps the suggestions and intuitions that the intern, System 1, throws on its desk.
Right. And because the sleepy captain is constantly fatigued, the mind has to rely on the autopilot shortcuts. This leads us directly into heuristics.
And one of the most insidious tricks System 1 uses is substitution, right?
Oh, absolutely. What's fascinating here is that these errors aren't driven by emotion, but by the very design of our cognitive machinery. When faced with a complex question, say, how much should financial predators be punished? That requires a massive, cognitively expensive analysis.
You'd need to understand law, economics, sociology.
Exactly. So System 1 rejects the cognitive expense. Instead, it secretly swaps the hard question for an easier one. How much anger do I feel when I think of financial predators?
Wow. So it answers the easy emotional question and passes that off to System 2 as the answer to the complex policy question,
Yeah.
and you rarely ever notice the swap.
Almost never. And this completely alters how we judge people around us. Consider the famous Steve example from Kahneman and Amos Tversky's research.
Oh, listeners, visualize this scenario. You are told about a man named Steve, selected at random from the population. A neighbor describes Steve as very shy and withdrawn, invariably helpful, but with little interest in the world of reality.
A meek and tidy soul with a need for order and a passion for detail. Is Steve more likely to be a librarian or a farmer?
I mean, almost everyone immediately pictures a librarian, because System 1 is just comparing the description to a cultural stereotype.
Right, but statistical reality tells a very different story. In the United States, there are roughly 20 male farmers for every one male librarian.
The base rate of farmers is so overwhelmingly high that it's almost mathematically certain there are more meek and tidy souls driving tractors than sitting behind library reference desks.
But our brains completely discard that statistical base rate. We just ignore it.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Let me push back. If I meet someone incredibly shy and meticulously organized, predicting they are a farmer just feels intuitively wrong. Isn't relying on these personality traits actually a survival mechanism?
Well, yes, pattern recognition absolutely kept our ancestors alive when deciding if a shadow was a rock or a predator. But the breakdown happens when we apply that fast pattern matching to modern, complex statistical problems.
So it's about context.
Exactly. The danger isn't that you noticed Steve's traits. The danger is that your brain treats a neighbor's flimsy, subjective description as absolute proof, while entirely ignoring the mathematical reality of the world.
Kahneman coined a term for this, didn't he? WYSIAD. What you see is all there is.
Yes, WYSIAD. It's the mind's brilliant, albeit flawed, ability to construct the best possible causal story, using only the information currently activated in your brain.
It never pauses to ask, what information am I missing? It just weaves whatever scraps it has into a confident narrative.
And that weaves directly into the availability heuristic. We estimate the probability of an event by how easily examples come to mind.
Like the letter K experiment. If I ask you whether the letter K is more likely to appear as the first letter in an English word or as the third letter, you instinctively search your memory.
Right, and it is infinitely easier to recall words that start with K, kitchen, kangaroo, kite.
Trying to find words where K is the third letter, like acknowledge or ask, is a massive strain on System 2.
So, because the neural pathways for the first letter words are more heavily greased, System 1 falsely concludes that K must be a more frequent first letter.
Even though the reality is that K appears far more often in the third position.
Exactly. We conflate the fluency of our memory retrieval with actual probability. If a plane crash dominates the news, the images are highly available in your memory, so you drastically overestimate the danger of flying.
While happily ignoring the statistically massive danger of driving your car to the airport simply because car crashes don't make the national evening news.
Precisely. Now, this reliance on the immediate story in front of us, WYSIAD, doesn't just warp how we judge people at risk. It fundamentally distorts how we value things.
Because our brain will grab onto literally any piece of information in its environment to build that story. It will even use completely random numbers to dictate our financial choices.
Which brings us to the mechanism of anchoring. If we connect this to the bigger picture, classical economists imagine econs, perfectly rational actors. But behavioral economics realizes we are humans, driven by reference points.
Right, like the Exploratorium seabird experiment. Researchers asked visitors how much they'd contribute to save offshore seabirds from oil spills. But before asking for the donation, they planted a seed.
For one group, they asked a preliminary question. Would you be willing to pay $5? For another group, they asked, would you be willing to pay $400?
Those are completely arbitrary numbers thrown into the wind, and yet, the group that heard the $5 anchor gave an average donation of $20. The group that heard the $400 anchor gave an average of $143.
It's incredible. When you hear the number 400, your associative machine automatically activates a network of ideas compatible with that number: large expenses, major crises, significant wealth.
And when you hear 5, it activates networks related to spare change and triviality. System 1 provides this primed context to System 2, which then adjusts its final answer based on that starting point.
Which completely shatters the foundational assumption of classical economics. Kahneman and Tversky's prospect theory proved we do not evaluate a pure state of wealth. We evaluate changes from a reference point.
And the emotional center of our brain creates a change in wealth very differently depending on the direction of that change, which leads to loss aversion.
Right. The psychological pain of losing something registers neurologically roughly twice as intensely as the pleasure of gaining that exact same thing.
I always struggled to believe the extremity of this until I saw the endowment effect experiment with the coffee mugs.
Oh, that's a brilliant one.
Kahneman and Richard Thaler divided people into two groups. The sellers were handed a standard university coffee mug and asked what price they would demand to sell it.
And the choosers were not given a mug, but were told they could either receive a mug or receive cash, and were asked to set the cash value where they'd be indifferent.
So they are facing the exact same choice: leave the room with a mug or leave the room with money. The only difference is the reference point.
Yet the sellers demanded an average of $7.12 to give up the mug. The choosers valued the exact same mug at only $3.12. Ownership instantly changes value.
I have to pause here because this always sounds like a slight exaggeration. Does just holding a $3 coffee mug for 30 seconds really rewire how our brain calculates its absolute market value?
It absolutely does, because you aren't calculating market value anymore. For the sellers, giving up the mug is coded by the brain as a loss. For the choosers, acquiring the mug is coded as a gain.
So because losses hurt twice as much, the sellers demand more than twice as much money to offset the psychological pain of parting with the object.
Exactly. Our evolutionary biology makes us hypervigilant to losses.
It makes total sense when you look at how we behave with concert tickets. Imagine you buy a ticket for $200. The day of the show, you find out it's completely sold out and people are paying $3,000 for tickets online.
You could sell yours, make a huge profit, and stay home.
But you refuse. You go to the concert. If you didn't have a ticket, you would never in a million years pay $3,000 to buy one. But because you already own it, the pain of losing the ticket completely overrides the logic of gaining $3,000.
You aren't actually valuing the ticket. You are valuing the emotional distance from your current baseline. You're paying to avoid the psychological pain of loss.
Okay, so if our minds are this detached from rationality regarding money and statistics, surely we at least know what makes us happy, right? We know what makes us feel good.
Well, no. This raises an important question about how society and individuals prioritize the creation of a good narrative over actual day-to-day well-being. The way we encode and experience happiness is arguably the most profound cognitive illusion Kahneman uncovers.
Because there's a conflict between two different regions of ourselves, the experiencing self and the remembering self.
Exactly. The experiencing self is the you that lives in the present millisecond. It answers the question, does it hurt right now? Or am I enjoying this sip of coffee?
And the remembering self is the archivist. It keeps score. It answers the question, how was the trip on the whole?
And the startling reality is that these two selves have wildly different agendas, and the remembering self holds all the power over your future choices. The remembering self doesn't keep a minute-by-minute log of reality.
It drastically compresses data, right? using duration neglect and the peak end rule.
Yes, it completely ignores how long an experience lasts. It only records the absolute peak intensity of the emotion and exactly how the experience ended.
Kahneman illustrates this brilliantly with the story of the scratched symphony record. There's this man listening to a beautiful symphony on a vinyl record. 40 minutes of absolute musical transcendence.
But at the very end of the record, a terrible scratch produced a horrific screeching sound.
And the man claimed the bad ending ruined the whole experience for him. But logically, it didn't. He had already lived through 40 minutes of genuine joy. The screech didn't travel back in time and erase the dopamine from his brain.
It only ruined the memory of the experience. The experiencing self had a wonderful 40 minutes, but the remembering self only recorded the screeching finale and therefore categorized the entire event as a failure.
We see this biological quirk weaponized in the cold hand experiment, too.
Oh, the cold hand study truly exposes the illusion. Researchers had participants plunge their hands into incredibly cold, painful ice water.
Right. In the short trial, the participant keeps their hand in freezing water for 60 seconds, then removes it. In the long trial, they keep their hand in the exact same freezing water for 60 seconds, but then the experimenter secretly releases a valve, letting slightly warmer water flow in for an additional 30 seconds.
The water is still painfully cold, but the pain eases just a fraction at the very end. Objectively, the experiencing self suffers more in the second trial. It endures the exact same 60 seconds of severe pain, plus an additional 30 seconds of moderate pain.
It is strictly a greater sum of total physical suffering. Yet, when participants were asked which trial they would prefer to repeat for a third round, an overwhelming majority volunteered for the longer trial.
They volunteer for more total pain, because the remembering self is the one making the choice. It ignores the 90-second duration. It only logs the peak pain and the end pain.
Because the end of the longer trial was slightly less agonizing, the archivist coded the entire 90-second memory as better than the 60-second memory.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean? We are literally subjecting ourselves to more physical pain in the lab just so our remembering self can tell a slightly better story about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
We sacrifice our moment-to-moment reality to serve a story. Kahneman pushes this to its philosophical limit with the amnesic vacation thought experiment.
Oh, this is the ultimate thought experiment. He asks, imagine you were planning your dream vacation. Would you choose the exact same itinerary if you knew that the moment the trip ended, all of your photos would be permanently destroyed and you would be required to take an amnesia pill that wiped out every single memory of the experience?
And when faced with that constraint, most people drastically alter their plans. They abandon the exhausting, frenetic travel to see famous landmarks.
Because they realize much of their standard vacation isn't actually designed for the enjoyment of the experiencing self in the moment. It's exhausting labor performed to build a shiny, impressive memory for the remembering self to look back on.
We spend a staggering amount of our lives cultivating memories for a self that doesn't even exist in the present. It profoundly shifts how you view your own motivations.
To bring this incredibly rich journey full circle, we are governed by an associative, hyperactive system 1 and a biologically constrained, lazy system 2. We jump to conclusions by assuming what we see is all there is.
We substitute impossibly hard questions for easy emotional ones. We let arbitrary numbers anchor our reality. We operate from shifting reference points, fearing the pain of loss twice as much as we enjoy the thrill of gain.
And ultimately, we routinely sacrifice the actual happiness of our lived moments just to feed a compelling narrative to our memory.
But armed with this vocabulary anchoring, WYSAD, loss aversion, base rate neglect, you are no longer a passive passenger on that commercial jet.
You are the most astute observer at the water cooler, fully equipped to diagnose these invisible mechanisms in your colleagues and eventually in yourself.
Because seeing the machinery of the illusion is the only way to begin dismantling it.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a thought to mull over this week, building on that conflict between your two selves. Think about your schedule for this coming weekend.
Are the plans you've made actually designed to maximize the joy of your experiencing self in the present moment?
Or are you just performing labor to build a shiny memory for your remembering self to look back on? If you couldn't remember Sunday, what would you do on Saturday?
It is a question that completely reorients how you value your own time.
It really is. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the hidden architecture of the mind. And remember, the next time you feel absolutely certain about a rapid-fire judgment, you might just want to wake up the captain.